So here I have a mini PC that allows you to slot it into an external GPU setup. And this GPU setup here is quite a clean looking one, as you can see that you don't have a messy external power supply because it is internal and up to 600 watts. There's no size constraint on the GPUs as well. I have a monster RTX 4090 here from MSI that I'm running that I'll show you in this video here. And a bit of a spoiler, the performance I'm getting from the external GPU doesn't really line up with what I should be able to get. I have some sort of problem with drivers or something that's going on. Maybe it's my card itself, maybe it's something else, but I'll talk more about that in this video here. But our mini PC itself here from Beelink is called the GTi14 Ultra. It's powered by the Intel Core Ultra 9185H. It does have 16 cores, 22 threads, turbos at 5.1 gigahertz, and you can configure it to 65 watts. It's got Wi-Fi 7 on board, 2 PCIe 4.0 slots for SSDs. It comes with one already pre-installed with Windows 11 Pro, and it's a mini PC that you can also upgrade the RAM onto, which is great. So it's quite a powerful unit here and giving us a lot of flexibility that if you want, you've got the option to buy the external GPU dock here and run some very powerful graphics cards. Included with our GT Ultra, you'll find a user manual just under here. This is just a piece of card with padding on it. It does actually say hello. Pretty hard to see that. We've got a power cable, EU1, and it's using that Infinity style plug. Okay, very common. You could easily replace this. And then they do also include an HDMI cable here, which is a bit difficult for me to get out of the box. There we go. So HDMI cable. You'll note that where's the power supply? Well, that's because it's built into the unit, 145 watt one too. The GT Ultra is a little bit larger than what you commonly see with a mini PC, but it's not too bad. As you can see, my hands here feels a bit heavier than the typical one too because of the built-in power supply, but then when you factor you still have to carry a power supply anyway, the weight is about the same as what you get with any other mini PC. So at the front here, I like how it's very simple looking. We have a full-size SD reader. I'll give you the speeds of this later on. This is USB Type-C, which is only USB 2 speed. So it's only just the 10 gigabits per second, but at least we have that port. A 3.5mm headphone jack with mic support, status LED, power button, and some microphones at the top. Microphone array there. Another USB 2, so that's really only good for plugging in, say, an external keyboard, wireless transmitter, whatnot there. I wish they were a little bit faster, those ports. It's one criticism from me. The faster ports, of course, are on the back, but we don't get many of them because we have a Thunderbolt 4 port right here, and then more USB 2s. In fact, a lot of them. So these are USB 2s at the top. Those two are USB 3.2, but Gen 1, so they're not exactly super fast. And then we have the 2.5 gigabit LAN ports right there. The display port does support up to 4K 144 Hertz. The HDMI is not going to support that. It is just 4K 60, so HDMI 2.0. Bit disappointing there. But again, you've got the Thunderbolt 4 to get 8K and 4K 144 Hertz. It will be able to do that as well. And then, of course, our power in cable. This part is plastic, vent at the back for the cooling. At the bottom of it, you will see our vent here too, and this has a bit of a dust filter mesh on the bottom of it, and built-in speakers. There are 2 of those, and right here is a rubber gasket that when you pull this out, that will expose the connection for our external dock. So this is PCIe times 8 right here, some solid rubber feet. They do even have a little tab here that when you do remove the 4 screws, you can simply just pull up on that to then pull the whole thing off, which is a nice little touch, and Beelink's been doing that for some time now. Attention to detail is very good with them. So you can see here, this is our built-in power supply, nice and small, and does have a warning on there not to do or touch any of this when it's operating, which is common sense. And you have to be careful with this, which is our wireless antennas on this plastic part here. So the cables are just there. You don't want to damage those. The 2 speakers, and you have to remove all of these screws to get under here where I can see our RAM. That's where our RAM is located, and the SSD you can see is just down in there. So a little complicated to get to everything. And it gets worse before it gets better, because this we need to loosen off. Now, I didn't have a socket that would fit this. I believe it's 4 millimeters. I only have a 5, but I just used some pliers to apply a little bit of pressure and loosen it off, and then I can now loosen that. And we have these ribbon cables to contend with that we don't want to damage at all. It's finally off. What a mission. But once you've done that, then this plate, when you remove all of those screws, of course, then gives us access to our 2 DDR5 RAM slots. Now, it's 5,600 megatransfers are the speeds you need for that, and our 2 PCIe 4.0 SSD slots. And there's even a wireless card there that you could replace if you wanted to, but it does have Wi-Fi 7, so I don't see why you would want to do that. So for upgrades, RAM, SSDs, wireless, that's great. It's just a nightmare to get in here. Good news when it comes to the BIOS. This is typical of Beelink to have it completely unlocked to us. Be very careful with what you change and adjust in here because it might not boot. So we have the CPU configuration. There's nothing really that you'd ever want to change in here, only for advanced users really. Power and performance. Okay, so if we go into this, which is the power management control, you'll find here the TDP configuration. So this is our power limit. And I've just made one change here because we've got two options. 54 watts is the default. I'm going to set it to 65 because the cooling on this is a very nice vapor chamber. It's got a large fan and it can handle it. I believe it can. So I'm going to leave it at the 65. I really want to see what this mini PC is capable of. And that's the level 2 configuration, which down the bottom you can see is set there to, actually it hasn't taken, I don't think. So just to make sure, I will make it 64 and 64 here. Don't change really any other settings, again, unless you know what you're doing there. Media management control, none of that needs to be changed at all. The other one is system agent. So if your RAM's not booting at the correct speeds, or perhaps you upgrade to 64 gigabytes and you use an XMP RAM that already has a profile set for the timings and the speed, then you'll find it under this menu here. And you'll be able to set it then and get it to work at the correct speed if it doesn't automatically select the right profile there for the RAM. Security, secure boot, boot order, boot override, all there. So great BIOS. I love that it's completely unlocked here for advanced users. The version that our GTi14 Ultra does ship with of Windows is Windows 11 Pro. And of course you need to run the updates and all of that stuff. Pretty normal there. I will quickly show you a couple of things in the device manager that I think are of interest. So that Wi-Fi card that we can replace, just like the SSDs and our RAM, all upgradable, those components, is the Wi-Fi 7 BE200. This is a very good chipset here. Performance has been great. Signal strength, I've not had any issues because the antenna's on the bottom of it. So try to face that side towards your wireless router if you can. Now, I don't have Wi-Fi 7 yet. I can't really justify the price in buying one of those. They're pretty expensive, but I'm sure it will perform quite well. And you can see that we have the chipset listed here, the 22 times. It's got 16 cores, 22 threads, maximum turbo is 5.1 gigahertz. And as I configured at 60 watts there, so TDP is pretty high. It should perform quite well. Sorry, the 65. The other is the SSD. You can see the brand of it right there, the model, and the speeds, okay. Normally I see slower than this for the included stock drive that brands use. So it's not the full PCIe 4.0 speeds. I believe BitLocker is enabled, affecting the performance a little bit. So you can, of course, get better out of this. You could upgrade if you were concerned about those speeds and just wanted to have a little bit faster there. Okay, so other benchmarks I have run. So starting out with integrated graphics, I'll move on to the dedicated GPU and that RTX 4090 I showed you at the start there soon. So we have a score here of graphics, 34,000. Not bad considering this isn't the fastest RAM. The onboard RAM normally is clocked at even 8,000 megatransfers and over, just over that. And it can perform up to a scores of, say, 37,000, 36,000, so a bit better there, but not bad considering. And here we have, I'm sorry, it's in German for some reason. I don't know why it's done that. But here we have a graphics score of 3,470. Again, it's very good, but if we had the faster RAM, this chipset's capable of around 3,800, 3,700, the best I've ever seen it. So you can get scores of times by over 4,000. This is getting near, so not bad at all considering factoring in those RAM speeds. And we have Geekbench 6 score. So this again could be a better score for this chipset if we had the faster RAM, but factoring in the RAM running at the 5,600 mega transfers, this is actually very good there, and no problems. It's running in dual channels, so RAM is as expected there, and the performance. So a couple other things I want to show you is what about decoding performance now, some demanding video. Sony Swordsmith, this one here is a video that does run at 60 frames per second. And we'll see how the Arc graphics handles this. All right, that is looking very good. No problems. I will skip ahead. And it does not look to be dropping any frames to me, which is what we want. The one that will drop frames is probably this, the 140 megas per second, 4K 10-bit. And there we go. The start tends to lag, and it's to do with the controls of the video and the video player. Okay, that's all a bit choppy. That's not amazing performance. That should be so much better than what it is, especially considering the spec of this chipset, Media Lake. I mean, it's got a lot of power to it. Windows in general is very quick. Performance is great. And I will show you Cinebench, which again is a score here that I got. Single core, 1,800 points, and then we have the 13,800 for a multi-core score. They're good considering, again, the RAM speeds. And remember, I am running that higher TDP, the power limit. That's aiding the performance a little bit here. And what about that SD card reader? Really good to have it, don't get me wrong, but have a look at the speeds that we're getting. It's not exactly fast. Now, the SD card that I have in here, it can do a lot better than this. It should be double, around the 200 megawatts per second mark. So it caps out at about 100, which is okay, but it could be fast. I do wish it was a high-speed one. Thermals of the system running the integrated graphics only, so not the external GPU, have been fine. This is all the stress tests, the benchmarks I were doing, and the gaming too as well. So you can see it got up to 94 degrees, the package, the chipset, sorry, 93, and that's fine. These are a lot lower than what I saw on the last mini PC with the exact same chipset that got up to 103 degrees Celsius. So Beelink has done an excellent job with the cooling, considering I'm running a high power limit here. I'm running 65 watts for all of the power limits. So it is really pushing the limits of what this chipset can do, but the thermals I think are fine. Now, fan noise is excellent. It's very quiet most of the time when you're doing nothing. It's a very low RPM. You can barely hear it. It only ramps up when you're doing something demanding and then quickly disappears, which is the way I like it. I don't like the continual fan noise. Thermal throttling was triggered, you can see, and that tends to trigger this. It will tell me that it's thermal throttling very low on. Around 70 degrees it starts to do that. I don't know why that is. That's what it does though. And what about fan noise? Well, I'll give you a sample now. This is worst case scenario running Cinebench just to give you an idea of what it's like under maximum load. Even under full load, that fan noise is so good. The cooling system on this Beelink, I think they've done an excellent job with it. Well done. So now with that RTX 1490 connected up, you can see that it's PCIe times 8 and not the times 16. So we are losing some bandwidth. There's going to be some restrictions as well with the CPU compared to what you would normally run in a desktop with this class top-end GPU. So I have run, and it's just these two benchmarks here that I'm going to show you. So first up, Time Spy. Now this card in a desktop PC with the 13900K overclocked a little bit can do around about 36,000 points for the graphics score for Time Spy. I apologize, it's in German again. I have no idea what's going on. I have set the region to English and US, not meant to be German. Anyway, this score is falling behind. Yes, quite a bit there, and that's more of a performance loss, at least with these synthetic benchmarks, than I was expecting. I was expecting under around about 5% or so. I was at least hoping it would get into the 30,000 mark, but it's just falling short a little bit of that, and I'm not really too sure why. I'm on the latest drivers, I've updated everything, and the bandwidth that we can get out of that times 8 port that connects to the mini PC to the times 16 slot is 12.5 gigabits per second. And it should be able to, I was checking into this, I think it should be able to do about 15.7 or around 15. So that is a little behind. Could explain why the GPU score here isn't as high as I think it should be. I was estimating around 32,000. Gaming, this is just now going to be the integrated graphics, and I will just run the in-game benchmark here because I want to focus on that dedicated GPU performance because it's a lot more interesting, let's face it, and not as low performing as this is going to be here. So the in-game benchmark will be run on the low preset here, and that's just the default one that it did come up with, and this is at 1080p, just to give us an idea. And we got an average of 27.81 frames per second at 1080p with the Intel Arc graphics. Still at 1080p with Cyberpunk 2077, but I have now set it to the ray tracing medium preset, considering we've got a top-end card here, and we'll have a look and see how it performs. 82.17, I was expecting a little bit better, so it certainly is underperforming to me. It should be better than this, but that's just what it currently is, and I'm just reporting the results here. One in-game benchmark more on the internal graphics, the Arc graphics. So this is at 1080p, and I will set it to, well, it's on the high preset file graphics quality. And only 26 frames per second with our Arc graphics. Now, the 890M from AMD can do a lot better, and with the RTX 4090 now, you can see much better, as expected. 123 frames per second for 1080p high preset is in fact quite low for this GPU. I was expecting a lot better, but we're being held back by the PCIe performance of only being ×8, and also I think the chipset's another factor. So I love the setup here. I love the fact that it's got a 600 watt internal power supply, very good, and the internal power supply also on the mini PC I think is a great option. Now the performance of that Ultra 9185H is decent, it's very good. The single core scores aren't as impressive as what we used to have with previous generations, but it still is a good unit there. The Arc graphics packs a lot of performance. Now I didn't show in this video editing because it's just dragging on a little bit too long. The performance is very good out of both units here for video editing. Amazing. I mean, that was pretty self-explanatory and obvious that it was going to be good with this kind of setup. Linux, haven't shown that either, but I can tell you that I've tested it, that Linux Manjaro open source drivers working with this unit here. You may have some issues depending on what build you're using of distro or whatever Linux you're going to be going with the Wi-Fi 7 drivers, it being so new, that hardware. And the Wi-Fi 7's been working great. 2.5 gigabit LAN, working great there as well. And it's a very good unit. Now, what I love the most about it would be the fan noise is excellent, that it's not continuous, and, well, it is actually, it's on, but a very low RPM that you can't even hear it when it's idle, doing basic tasks. And when it's under full load, as you heard from my sample, impressive fan noise. It's not like a jet engine. It's not having an afterburner F18 right next to you, FA18. No, it's quite good. The whole setup here, I think, is quite clean. Yes, the external GPU, maybe it looks a bit ugly, but having an internal power supply tidies things up. And I love the fact that if you didn't need it, you don't have to power the external GPU on. You can just run your mini PC first. A couple of notes though, that when you run the mini PC with an external GPU, it will automatically disable the Arc graphics. Now, if you're someone who video edits with Adobe Premiere Pro like I do, you want the integrated graphics still because it gives us quick sync performance to encode video a lot faster. So you have to go into the BIOS and find under the GPU settings, graphics settings, and enable it from auto for the primary graphics to HG, putting it in a hybrid mode so it will run then both. It will sacrifice a bit of performance because it's like having the mux switch that they call it off. So it's going to affect the performance. And if you're wondering, is my performance bad because I was running the graphics or the GPU output via the internal integrated graphics? No, I had the external GPU HDMI straight into the capture card, so it's not that either. Trust me, I went over everything to try and figure out why my performance is lower than expected. However, other units that I've seen in others' reviews, they're only losing about 5% performance loss, which is fantastic. I think it's well worth it for a setup like this. So there we go. That is the Beelink EX external GPU dock with our GTi14 Ultra mini PC. I think it's one of the best I've covered so far, and I think Beelink is definitely back on their game and offering us quality mini PCs here, and I love the internal power supply units that they have within them. It's great. So thanks a lot for watching this video.